Hi, and welcome to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money, and investing. I'm your host, Richardson from OTG Capital. This program is proudly sponsored by OTG Capital, and we are broadcast locally on Radio Northern Beaches, on the sunny northern beaches of Sydney, and we are also syndicated to 15 different community radio stations around Australia, complements of the Community Radio Network and the Community Broadcasting Association of Australia. I'm really pleased to welcome back to the microphone and camera Jen Richardson, who is a financial educator. She's also an accountant, an ex-financial planner, so she's got qualifications up the wazoo and very knowledgeable, thankfully. She runs her own blog as well, and she also runs some financial literacy courses for those of you. Quickly, Jen, do you do them online as well, or are they mainly face-to-face?
No, it's all online.
It's all online?
Yep, all online.
There you go. Have internet will travel. So there you go. You don't need to be in the Hunter region to avail yourself of Jen's offerings in financial education. And that's what we do here at Dollars Making Sense, all about education. Now, for those of you that have been following the show, we've had Jen on now on a number of occasions, and this is an ongoing series of really interesting topics that Jen has written about on her blog. And this particular week, this is a subject near and dear to my heart because it really comes back to the basics of start early, get and infiltrate the young brain. So we're talking today about money and kids and money. And so how to teach your kids about money before habits stick. Now, obviously, you're talking about bad habits sticking because we want the good habits to stick. So I guess one of the things we've talked about recently in our shows about the regress now of paper money in favor of online and digital forms of transactions. For me personally, that's been the demise of being able to teach kids money. Would you agree with that statement?
I do. Certainly for my children, I tipped out the wallet and got all the coins and things out, and they used to get coins as their, I'm going to say reward, but it was trying to teach them how they got money and they did it. And, you know, certainly my children, my father used to play golf. Back in the day, you know, everything was paid with cash. So when he would come out, he used to mind my children 2 days a week for me so that I could work. And he would come out and pick them up. But the first thing they would do is they'd run and he would empty his pockets of all the coins from the golf day the day before.
Oh.
And they had a big, you know, one of those big metal money boxes. You can still buy them and they're wrapped looking like a dollar note.
Yeah.
But they had one of them and they'd run to the linen cupboard and that's where it was kept, and they'd throw all the coins in. Then when we had our family annual holiday, the week before, we'd get the can opener and we'd open that up and we'd divide it all up for them.
Cool.
And that was actually their spending money. We used to go on holidays annually to a place called Crescent Head.
Oh, I know that well.
Well, yeah, so we used to hire a little house on the creek there. So the kids, when they were old enough, could ride their bike around to the caravan shop. And I taught them that, you know, when their money ran out, their money ran out. Don't come to me for the rest of the holidays looking for your ice cream or the, you know, the cakes and things like that they wanted to buy from the canteen shop. And they never got too much money from it, but it was teaching them that they had to spread that out over the 3 weeks. You know, you could either go and have this wonderful feast in the first week, and when your brothers were going down to the shop, you weren't going to have any, which my youngest worked out very quickly the first year, that the money has to stretch. And so sometimes life's lessons come in tough lessons, and he very quickly learnt that he could only have an icy pole for the rest of the holiday. That was it. But you know what? He didn't make that mistake the next 12, you know, in the 12 months' time when he did it.
Yes.
So the physical cash side of handing it over is teaching the children. But, you know, I always say as an educator, we need to adapt to the current environment. It's no good saying that, you know, that's how kids learn and that's how they should learn. So that's the only way they can learn. The world that we live in is what we need to adapt the teachings to, because this is the world they live in.
Yeah, it's no point regressing because that's not the real world that they're going to live in, is it?
No, it's not. Having said that, I would still, with kids, get the coins out just to teach them what physical money is, but then the strategies for how to challenge life and be ahead of it is about lots of other strategies.
Yeah, I guess, I have 3 children, and the moment we could, back in the day when the Manly Daily, it's now defunct, but the Manly Daily was a community rag, Cumberland newspapers, but you could do a paper run and get a handful of, not a lot, huge amount of money, but you had to be up early. It was a pain in the rear end, and they delivered the papers. It was a bit of hard yakka, but they would then get the physical attributes of that cash arriving in their bank account. And there was this correlation between effort and pay. And I think that's I think the key message that I keep on trying to relay to my kids is that even when you go to the grocery store and you see a loaf of bread these days, a white loaf of bread is $3. What does it take to earn that $3 out in the real world? And how does that correlate to an hourly wage? And particularly with a lot of kids and the lack of jobs out there, many of them are in hospo jobs that aren't paying a huge amount. So again, there's a very real correlation between how much they make as serving coffees or a barista compared to buying food at their local supermarket. So I guess from making money visible again, even if it is pay wave, what do you think are the tips and tricks there that parents can use in working with their kids so that they start being able to correlate a labour for pay transfer, or being able to associate value somehow with waving a device?
Yeah, so it depends on the age of the child, clearly. For a young child, so sub 6 years of age, it's very much about just having those conversations with them. This is what groceries cost. This is what you've got to do. This is why we are saving for something. And we've become a I want it now society. So, you've got all the buy now, pay laters and things.
VNPL,
so you don't have to work initially to get it. So I think the conversations you need to have, and Ray, I always talk about a quiet household or a noisy household. So ideally we would like kids to grow up in a noisy household. And noisy doesn't mean arguments, although that can be part of the noisy household, but it's mean that the discussions are happening. So, when I was teaching my kids, I grew up in a quiet household, and I came out of that household with no budgeting skills, no money skills, because Dad looked after it all and it was all done very quietly. The mum and dad didn't argue about money, but I got the sense from, that we didn't have money. So I deliberately brought my children up in a noisy household. So we would go shopping and I would explain to them, that we can't quite afford that this week, but if we don't buy this and we save a little bit, next week we can buy that thing. And it would always be something they wanted. And it might be just a toy or a book or something, but it's about having that conversation of, you don't get it now, you've got to hold on and we've got to save for it. When they get from 6 years onwards to that 12 years, that's the real key area where you need to get that real, you work for something. And so for my children, it was they got paid, but they didn't get their money for doing nothing. There was no pocket money that came out at the end of each week just because it was Thursday. They had jobs they had to do. It was very simple jobs. They had to feed the dogs. They had to make sure the dogs had fresh water. They had to take the garbage down. They had to pack the dishwasher, unpack the dishwasher. And it was we had a calendar, just like a roster on the board.
Yeah, I like that.
Balanced up, between the three of them, what tasks they had, and they would move to the next task the next week. So I sort of equated it to day shift, afternoon shift, and night shift. So there was none of this, his job's easier than my job. 1 week they had garbage, the next week they had the dogs, the week after they had the dishwasher. If they had to be asked to do their task, they had a discount in what they got paid.
Okay.
And if they did over and above, they got additional. So they worked overtime.
So you had a real penalty rate then. You penalised.
I did. And they knew that if they wanted to buy something, and the same thing, look, I never made them go without too much, but all those additional things that they wanted, if they knew they wanted something, they knew they had to do overtime. So that really equated for my kids. The the connection between working and having things. It also made them quickly realize how important things are, because suddenly it's like, oh, do I want to do all that extra work just to buy that crappy little toy that I'm probably going to give up on in a week's time?
Yeah.
And then when they're 12 onwards, we start to talk about the hourly rate that they do. You know, is that thing worth you working a whole shift at McDonald's? Or is that thing something that is so important that you are prepared to hand it over for that? So it's sometimes called girl maths, you know, how many times you're going to wear that dress for how much it costs. So working it out the cost of wear.
Well, that's boy maths as well, I got to say.
Well, it is, but it got thrown out there as girl maths. But that 12 onwards is then relating to, you know, your goals. So, you know, all my kids grew up that they had to save half their wage every week for something. Didn't matter whether it was, you know, my kids are in their early 20s to mid 20s, and they have quite a significant share portfolio because I taught them when you get some spare cash, we buy shares. They all salary sacrifice into their superannuation because I taught them that, and this was the conversations we had. This is how much extra you will have in retirement if you put $20 a week into your super. You know, talk about shares, the risk and return, talk about how many hours you want to work, how the tax system works, how, you know, giving does things. And so it's that general conversation from 12 onwards about real life situations, as opposed to those first 6 years, the second 6 years, and then hopefully by the time they're 18 and leaving home or never leaving home, leaving school. Said me as a mum of mid-20s, as I said, my kids are 23, 24 and 25. All three of them are still at home. And, you know, because again,
we live in a different world, and that's just the way it is. Certainly for us Sydney-siders, you know, having your kids under your roof at this age now is just a reality, because guess what? It's like that in London. It's like that in Rome and Milan and a whole bunch of other places. Absolutely. When housing is this costly, it just is. It just is. Look, we're at halftime here on Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. I'm really pleased to have at the microphone Jen Richardson, who is a financial educator, content provider, amongst a whole bunch of other things. She's got quals, like I said, up the wazoo. Really pleased to have her on the show. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to continue this discussion in just a moment. Hi, and thank you for listening to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly radio program about finance, money and investing on Radio Northern Beaches and nationally on the Community Radio Network around Australia. The views, comments and opinions aired during our program should not be construed or viewed as financial advice. Any commentary is general advice only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. You should consider whether the advice is suitable for you and your personal circumstances. If in doubt, you should contact an authorised licensed financial planner. We welcome questions and feedback, and you can get in touch with us via our blog, social media channels or email. Please search for Dollars and Making Sense in your favourite podcast platform, or check out our blog at otgcapital.com.au/blog. Hi, and welcome back to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. I'm really pleased to have at the microphone Jen Richardson from jenrichardson.co, if you want to look her up on the interweb. And she is from the Hunter region. She's an ex-financial planner and runs a whole range of really cool financial literacy courses that I'd highly recommend to people that want to go out and learn a little bit more. And today we are talking about kids and money. Now, Jen, before we went to the break, I really like the idea of what you're doing with chores and correlating effort for money. One of the things that I found quite valuable, and it's only been, I guess, a product in the last sort of 10 or 15 odd years when the regulator finally stepped in and forced supermarkets to adopt labeling where you would see a price per kilo. One of the arguments that we always used to have at the supermarket was, why are we always getting the cheap-ass milk arrowroot biscuits instead of the really nice, chocolate-covered blah, blah, blahs? And I'd be sitting there just despairing because I was trying to explain to them a unit cost. And so when the regulator finally regulated and said, you've got to put the unit cost on there, I was then able to show them and say, look at the price for that biscuit compared to that biscuit. And then they'd look at it and go, in sometimes 3-4 times the price. I'm saying, do you get it now? And then all of a sudden you could see the light bulb went
Ding,
on.
ding, ding.
Exactly. And so that, together with my other little weapon I use, and as the kids have now got older, they're all in their 20s and my eldest is now early 30s, there's this propensity now to have deliveries. I can't be bothered going out the door. I'll have one of the ride share mobs that will deliver a fast food treat, and I look at them and go, do you understand what's going on here? And I actually did this. I took a band tour to Darwin in 2013 with Barrenjoey High School, and we showed the kids the money, what it cost to, for example, go to the supermarket, get a whole bunch of roast chooks, compared to actually buying a takeaway meal. It was triple the price. And the kids were sitting there going, wow, look at that. And that was a really clear example. And again, when the kids get deliveries, I'm just sitting there going, guys, you're killing your ski trip at the end of the year, because I'm getting them to save up. I want to go abroad and take them to a nice family ski holiday. But I said, you've got to contribute as well. And I'm saying, every time you do this meal, that's one less thing you can't do when we're off wherever we're going to be going. And so, I think the corollary there is quite strong, but we're getting helped a little bit as we go. I'm curious, Jen, do you have any other little hacks that you work with your clients or even with your own kids?
Yeah, so again, this is about goal setting, and this is a skill that we have lost as individuals. When I first got my driver's license, my goal was to have a car so I didn't have to ask mum or dad to borrow theirs, or it had to be home at a certain time. But it's all about setting goals. And, the first thing that I always work with when I'm working with women in their financial literacy coaching is that let's set some goals, because when you set goals, it becomes a really important thing. And I think we forget that we need to teach children that. And so because we've become this I want it and I want it now society. But if you said to kids, let's work out what it's going to cost, break it down, what you need to do to get to that goal, all of a sudden it becomes much simpler. And I always work on the 4 Ps when I do my goal setting with the kids, which is make it positive, make it personal, prioritize it, but also make it possible. And if you do your goal setting and keep those 4 Ps in mind when you're doing it, it's very simple. Quite often we hear everybody, we want the now, so they make their goal, but it's not possible. They're quite happy to do the 3 Ps, but you must have all 4 of those Ps when you do your goal setting. So, I sat with my kids and, this is something that I taught them very early on. What do you want? What do you want to save for? And this is a conversation that we don't have too often anymore, because we go out and we do the buy now, pay laters, or we use the credit cards, or we use the whatever it is, whether it be, store credit. So we're getting the thing now and then worrying about the paying later. So sitting down with those goal setting things and coming up with your 4 Ps. And the thing that you were talking about, that you're having that conversation, then uses that prioritize part of the 4 Ps. What are you prioritizing? Is it this thing that you want, or is it the takeaway? And, reading the labels is one of the most important things that you can do, and you learn how to do it, because marketing, God bless its little common sense, is very good at telling us what we should have, not what we do. And I think you and I were talking last week, we were talking about when I was at the shops, it was a box of cans of cordial, and there was one box, the 24 box, and it was 40% off. So people would see 40% off and grab it. But the 30 box was actually still cheaper per litre than the one that was on special. And I often equate that. I taught my kids to read labels on food products as well when they were very young, because marketing is there. And I remember having a discussion with the childcare centre that they went to, that my second child didn't like milk or things, and I was always trying to find ways of getting calcium into his meals in his day because I struggled. And so there was this chocolate yo-go or something it was called. And that was one of the serves of dairy I could get into his day. And the daycare sent this note home saying he couldn't bring it because it was chocolate. And I went in with the label of the yogurt that they told me to get and the label of this yo-go and went, hang on, it's got more protein, it's got less sugar, it's got less salt, it's got whatever. And they turned around and they said, yes, but it doesn't look good for the other kids. I said, well, perhaps the other kids should be taught about nutrition. And this is the argument that I have. Knowledge is power no matter what you do. So teaching kids to make that decision. Having said that, Ray, you have to have some joy in life, and it can never be not having a takeaway meal or not having anything else. It's the happy medium, but that prioritizing part of the 4 Ps will determine which one you do and how often you do it.
And I couldn't agree more, Jen. I never want to be accused of being the Debbie Downer, and my kids will sometimes look at me and I just say, no, if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine, but understand there's always a price for it down the road. Okay, there always is.
And if you said to them they can't go skiing one day because they can't afford the ski lift, they will quickly prioritize.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right. And now I want to relate something in your blog. You've got there a paragraph titled, Give Money 3 Jobs. What do you mean there?
So we always say part of what we do with kids is teaching them to spend, save, and give. Now, you know, we become a society where we do help the less fortunate, and the GoFundMe pages have been very good at that, you know, a family struggling. And I think that's important to learn early on. And when you become a giver, and I'm not saying everybody has to donate because some people can't afford to donate, and I'm not saying that for a minute, but learning that you support other people, whether that be your family members, charities, you know, your next door neighbor, is a really important thing. So if every dollar that comes in, you learn how to spend it, how to save it, but also how to give it. And, you know, you're probably finding that now, Ray, with your children. You're giving a lot when they're young, but you're giving more now they're in their 20s because all of a sudden the things that you need to give for is much more expensive, you know.
Sure, but I'd also remind people, I'm a big one on community service. I love the idea of community service. This show, for example, I see as community service. I don't monetize this in any way, but also I volunteer at my local surf club. There are small things one can do. You know, you can volunteer at Salvos or at Lifeline, cook a sausage at a barbecue for a local school or whatever. And and so giving doesn't always mean cold hard cash. It can be your time, it can be your expertise. There are ways and means. And so I like that, give money 3 jobs. And I think the other one I like as well, let them make small money mistakes. What do you mean by that?
You learn from your mistakes quicker than you'll learn from your lessons. And so sometimes they've got to fail. Sometimes they've got to overspend and not be able to get the thing that they want. And, you know, I saw this with my kids, and this is, you know, a lot of what I teach now is because I fumbled along with teaching my kids. I didn't want my kids to grow up like I did. And, you know, you've got to remember, we're talking close to 20 years ago. I modeled most of this for my children. My middle son, at the time, scooters were in. I believe scooters are back in again, but scooters were in, and they used to buy these wheels that lit up and, you know, did everything when they rode them. And he desperately wanted these ones, but he was also the kid that when you went anywhere, if he had $2 in his pocket, he spent that $2. It would be junk, and I go, that's okay, it's your money, you can spend what you want, you're going to find the consequences later. And I remember he jumped onto, I think I can say it, eBay, bought these scooter wheels that he desperately wanted for his scooters that were big and they, you know, lit up like everything. Went to the checkout, went to his little money box, and he didn't have enough money. And so he came out and he goes, I haven't got enough money. And I went, not my problem. You spent it on all those little bits and pieces every time we went to the shops. And he was in tears, crying that he wanted it and he, you know, blah, blah, blah. He was about 8 at the time, I think. My mum was there, and my mum said, I'll give him the money. And I just looked at her and went, you will not.
Good
and
for you.
Goes, don't be so mean. How can you see that child? I said, because you know what? Next time he goes to the shop, he's going to make a decision whether he wants to buy that crappy little packet of stickers or whether he wants those sets of wheels. That
Well
kid
done.
never spent another cent until he got those wheels. And now he is my biggest, make your mind up which way you want to go out of my 3 boys. And he's very good at prioritizing because of that lesson. So,
Yeah.
you've got to be allowed to make mistakes. The hurt's real.
I love what you're saying, Jen. I have many anecdotes with my own kids because we used to walk past the little rides in the supermarkets, and my daughter was old enough and just tugged on the boys going, "Don't bother, Dad's never going to allow us," and just kept on walking by. And I just smiled at them and say, because I always saved, we took the kids skiing, and I said, "Do you want to go skiing, at the end of the year, or do you want to sit on that thing and make up your mind?" And they immediately went, "Oh, we want to go skiing." And the correlation was very quick. Well, look, we're just about out of time, Jen. It's always a pleasure. I love this subject. Get to them early, inculcate good habits. In amongst all of this, we haven't talked about gambling and the impact of gambling ads on our kids and the kind of messages that our wonderful marketers and government is giving. But I want to tackle that another time. Jen Richardson, thank you so kindly for being on Dollars and Making Sense. We're talking about kids and money. I think it's been really, really useful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I hope everybody gets something out of it.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Until next time, it's adios.